I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Robin, it's an unusual thing, but we get a warning this week from the home of drive-by shootings and school slayings when the US citizens were warned by their own government to be aware of their personal safety in Dublin, and they're told, do not travel in unfamiliar places and warned to keep a low profile. Obviously, it's a bit unusual, the US government giving that, but there is a context, obviously, with the attack on the US tourist this week, which it really has, I think, shocked people in general.
It has, the kind of violence involved in that attack on Wednesday of last week, and as you mentioned there, it is a bit of a sad state of affairs when the US government is giving out safety advice to your own state for their own citizens travelling there to be careful. But yeah, I think the violence in Dublin is nothing new. It's something we've kind of unfortunately come accustomed to in the last few weeks and months, with these kind of really vicious attacks involving gangs of youths. But I think the fact that it was a US tourist attack last week, that he was, he came over here to socialise. Stephen Termini, a 57-year-old man, he came over here to socialise, to visit Ireland, to visit heritage, and that he was subjected to such a violent attack. It was caught in video, which amplifies a bit more the fact that it happened near O'Connell Street, kind of one of the busiest streets in the capital, and the fact that it happened just yards from the Garda station as well. I think all these kind of matters amplify it that bit more.
It absolutely does, and he looks like, obviously the pictures of him, he looks like a nice guy, and people can understand his mother's buried over here, and all of those things kind of tug at people's heartstrings, I suppose. You've obviously had a good lot of conversations with his son, Mike. They're obviously still really concerned about the long-term impact of his health. Is there many updates on that?
There has been in the last couple of days, but initially the reports were fairly serious. He still lives in Beaumont Hospital, which is never a good sign. They specialise in head injuries, and he remains there in a serious but stable condition. And he remains in a coma, as far as I understand. And Mike told me, I was speaking to him last weekend, that there are serious concerns about the long-term impact on his eye and the possibility that he could lose some kind of vision in that eye, and also the long-term impact on any potential brain injuries. Obviously, he's received a number of kicks to the head. He was punched in the head, and he remains in a serious condition at the moment. So those kind of long-term impacted injuries are certainly concerned to his sons and his wider family.
And like his son, obviously you're talking to him. Like how was his feelings towards the country and towards the reaction to him? There's obviously been a huge outpouring of support as well from Ireland, and their GoFundMe has been, really, people have really given generously to that. Has he? What is his feelings towards the country now?
Well, they're mixed reactions. I think the initial one was one of shock. He got a phone call on the Thursday. It happened obviously on Wednesday night, and on Thursday got a phone call saying, your dad's being attacked, and he was expecting to say, but he's all right, but that obviously wasn't the case. So that kind of took him back a bit. Obviously, a lot of Americans, and I think Mike Rizzuto and Stephen Termini had that kind of view as well, that it's a nice country over here. Nothing like this would possibly ever happen, and unfortunately, that's just not the case. So I think it was initially one of shock, and then that GoFundMe was set up on Friday, and initially it was a bit slow moving, but I think Mike was saying he went to bed on the Friday night, woke up Saturday, and there's about $30,000 in it, and he was taken aback by that as well, the kind of outpouring of support, not just from his own friends and communities in America and New York where they're from, but also the amount of Irish people who were appalled by what happened and wanted to help the family in any way. And I think as recently as kind of Wednesday or Thursday this week, there's about $100,000 in that account, and it helped them travel over here on
and they've
Thursday.
landed here now, haven't they? They're in the country now.
Yeah, they landed on Thursday morning, so they got a flight overnight. And I think the last update from Mike has been that he's in hospital. Him and his brother Jesse are in Beaumont Hospital visiting their father. And one thing he said to me initially when I spoke to him last week was that he wanted to be there when his father wakes up. So that looks like it can be the case now, thankfully for them.
Now, obviously, the Garda investigation has progressed. That there's been 3 arrests at this stage. A couple of juveniles have come before the court. Have been brought before the courts. I'm not going to go into too much of the background there, but it has. They have made progress. I think it's fair to say in the investigation.
Definitely. I think the initial information on it stayed the same, as that 3 youths were centrally involved in this. There might have been a larger gang there, but 3 were responsible in some way for inflicting those injuries. One was identified fairly straight away, and he was arrested last weekend and brought before the courts without the media being notified, I think I have to add.
Yeah.
You know, it's normal that we get some kind of notice, a heads up that there will be a court appearance, especially for such a major case like this. That didn't happen, and we only found out on Sunday afternoon from a press release that he had appeared in court and was bailed to a different day. Then on Wednesday of this week, 2 other youths were arrested, a 14-year-old and 6-year-old. Now, one of them has since appeared in court, charged with Section 3 assault, and that other youth remains in Garda custody.
So, like, we obviously work here, Robin. Like, I don't know how long are you working in what was independent news and media? Are you there? Are you here?
Long time now. I think we're coming up in 10 years, 9 years.
That's not long compared with some of us, Robin. That way, right? So, like, you know, we're obviously in here. I mean, I'm in here more or less every day. You're in here 3 days a week or whatever. Like, you know, Talbot Street, you go out, you know, get your lunch or whatever. Like, is it Gotham City we're in?
I don't think it's that. Like, it is bad and serious stuff happens, but it's always been not the greatest street, let's say. You know, there's obviously good businesses here, there's good shops, there's nice pubs. It's not like you go out and you're kind of looking around in case you get clattered on a Wednesday afternoon getting your lunch, and plenty of the street's always busy in the afternoon as well, people going around doing their bits. But I think even in the last few years it has gotten worse, especially at night time. Well,
I tell you, it got worse during the lockdown, right? Now the other thing is, like as you said, you go for your lunch. Like, I go for my lunch every day. I don't feel like I'm going to be killed. It's not like, so there's a bit of a, you're on Twitter as I'm on Twitter, and you see this kind of debate. There's 2 sides. One is that we're living in the end of days, apocalyptic Dublin city centre. It's collapsing into sort of Mad Max beyond Thunderdome. And the other thing is, it's all just hyped up, and there's, you know, people are just, Ireland's one of the safest countries in the world. And, you know, obviously you got a bit of that from the government initially. They seem to come out and say, you know, they did come out and say, you know, Dublin's a safe city at night, and now they seem to be rolling back and saying, oh no, it is a bit dangerous after maybe a negative reaction. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, I think, you know, because we're sort of locals in the sense of working here. Like, but there is deep problems in Talbot Street, in that sort of area. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, there's kind of a balance to all these things, and like you said there, in the middle is the truth normally. And, you know, you walk down the street at 1 o'clock in the day, you're not going to feel too threatened. But also at night time, and, you know, the poor tourists who kind of come to Talbot Street, they might get a train to Connolly Station, or they might get off a bus and want to wander up. You see it a lot, kind of tourists walking along with their suitcases fresh off the plane, walking up Talbot Street. And you do kind of say to yourself, well, do they know what they're getting themselves into? Now, it's not like they're going to be attacked, but it's not maybe this kind of picturesque experience they expected of Ireland.
No, it's not Dublin's fair city in reality. And I mean, I think there's two sort of separate, maybe linked things. I mean, first there's the sort of the open drug use and the addiction problems that you see on Talbot Street, which is one side of it. The other side of it is, it seems to be a congregation of maybe teenagers that they're not necessarily the same group. I mean, I think the drug addiction aspect to it, like, it's not really dangerous. It is quite sad, though, to see, and this is not to stigmatise people or say, you know, these people should be locked up and kept away from public sight or anything like that. But there is, you can see maybe the victims of addiction, people that are unwell on this street. And, you know, it's not great that they're not getting access to services, maybe.
Yeah, I think people, like, it doesn't feed into the whole kind of violence of it. Like I said, there are 2 different groups. I know some people mightn't want to look at it and say that feeds in, but that's the reality of Dublin at the moment. You know, you've a lot of people with serious addiction issues who've fallen on extremely hard times, who just aren't getting the help they should be, and they're left in the street, and Talbot Street seems to be one of those places where they congregate, and that's, like, you wouldn't feel in fear walking by them.
No, absolutely not. I mean, these people are going to ask you for, you know, maybe ask you for a few quid or whatever. Like, I've never been threatened in 15 years or whatever working here. I've never being threatened by any of the people who have where you can see they're visibly suffering from addiction.
Yeah. Now,
like, nobody wants to see people taking drugs openly. You know, you will see some of that around Talbot Street. It's not, you know, it's not good for anybody. But it's not the same as that violence, and that violence, of course, is going on as well around the city centre. Like I think in the piece you wrote this week, you wrote about a few incidents, just for example, like the Ukrainian man who was attacked, and, other incidents in the city just in this week. Like there have been a few in this week alone. Wasn't there one in like the Ukrainian assault was quite a vicious one?
Yeah, Alexander Hikov, he's obviously a Ukrainian man. He's an actor. He's over the Abbey Theatre for a performance. He went outside and he was attacked by a gang of youths, and he was left in a serious condition in hospital. And again, that's one that really got kind of headlines, the fact that he's a foreign national over here, just performing, and got attacked. And so much so that when the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar went over to Kyiv in that kind of secret trip, he met Alexander and apologised to him. And that's just one of several incidents. There's a lot of them don't get as much traction as others. You have a lot of them you kind of get off social media, where I think there was one last month in Talbot Street where 4 youths set on one man and he ended up knocking 2 of them out, and they were kind of KO'd on the floor. There was another stabbing a few months ago on the corner of Talbot Street and Marlborough Street, I think it is. One lad was seriously injured and hospitalised, and there's another one in December where one person was knocked out, unconscious, and put into Beaumont Hospital. So it is happening a lot. It's happening too much. And as I said, it's different to that issue of drugs, where it's more of a health crisis, to be honest, and people in that really bad predicament. Whereas, on the other hand, you have gangs of youths effectively going around and kicking the head off people.
Yeah, I mean, there's they are different, and I mean, like to some extent, the city centre suffers because there's been a huge anytime. There's methadone clinics, there's addiction treatment centres in certain parts in Dublin city centre. You can see them in Merchants Quay and Pearse Street and around here in Amiens Street. And that, any time that people have tried to build these services in suburbia, really, they haven't been allowed, largely through politicians complaining about it. So you get a funneling of people in with addiction problems into the city centre. And that's because people want it out of their sight and, leave it in the city centre. I mean, the complicated problem, of course, of gangs of teenagers acting in that way, we've heard huge cries for more Gardaí on the beat this week. We had Helen McEntee floating along in, I don't know if that was a successful photo op. I'd argue it probably wasn't.
Didn't work out too great, I'd say, in the grand scheme of things.
No, I don't think so. So you get this call, more Gardaí on the beat. And, it is true that maybe there isn't a lot of visible Gardaí sometimes in the city centre. But you see then the difficulty in achieving that, because this week, just in the aftermath of that, you have the Gardaí. They're basically the frontline Gardaí are going to be balloted by the GRA. What is the issue there?
Well, there's a number of issues, and that decision was made on Wednesday at the Garda Representative Association's Central Executive Committee. And initially they wanted to hold a vote at a special delegate conference in a vote of no confidence in Drew Harris. It was decided then that they'll actually ballot the entire membership about that. And I don't think that's happened before, where the entire representative body, I think they're made up of around 12,000 people, will be balloted if they have confidence not in the Garda Commissioner. And there's an array of issues there. I think the main one, or the one that's been spoken about prominently, is rosters. Yeah. But it goes beyond that, I think, as well. And I think said in the press release this week, it's recruitment, it's welfare, there's so many other issues in the Guards at the moment that certainly the Gardaí, the rank and file, and probably sergeants and inspectors feel aren't being dealt with properly. And
no, because I mean, this is what people are calling for. You want more Gardaí on the beat. In order to get them on the beat, it has to be like they're struggling to recruit them for a start. Then according to the GRA in particular, they're struggling to retain the members. So people become guards, but they leave. It used to be a job for life, and people would stay till retirement. But they believe, and sometimes there's a dispute about this, but they say people are leaving more and more. They're not sticking with the job. So it's all very well to call for more Gardaí on the beat, and even to assign money to it. But at least according to the frontline Gardaí, they're not making their job workable. I mean, what is the situation with the roster? It's a 6-4, is that what they call it? Or?
Yeah, so basically at the start of the COVID pandemic, Drew Harris brought in this new emergency roster to utilise numbers better, and you had 4 shifts of 12 hours, and then they 4 days off. It's kind of fairly simple and straightforward roster. He wants to go back to a kind of pre-pandemic roster now where you have guards working 6 shifts of 10 hours with 4 days off. And the GRA certainly feel that it's just not workable. It's, it'll affect work-life balance. It'll affect the actual numbers on the streets, well, they're saying that's the kind of main tension.
That's 6 days in a row, is it? That they're 6 days in a row and then 4 days off in a row?
Yeah, and that's for, I suppose, the regular Garda units and some other kind of, I suppose, non-specialist units, but other core units where you'd be working 6 days. And then even for kind of national detective units, you might have a situation where they're working 8-hour shifts over 7 days.
Yeah.
And they'd certainly say that's not feasible at all. All the work they have to do, get it done in 8 hours, it's just not going to be possible. And they're going to be the overtime will be off the charts, basically, is kind of the feeling about that.
And then, of course, there is this constant feeling, if you talk to sort of maybe the frontline Gardaí about how the job has changed in terms of the paperwork in particular, that a lot of them can feel is become a huge part of the job. Is that fair to say, I think?
Yeah, I think the general consensus would be, people have been in the last 15 years that, or 20 years even, when they started off, you'd be allowed to do your job, you do it properly. Now, obviously, there's always been paperwork. It's not a new thing, but I think the amount of red tape now surrounding certain stuff and bureaucracy is just, you have people in stations filling out forms and filling out paperwork more than you have them out in the street, and that's also not going to affect. It's all well and good, and it's right to call for more guards, but if you're not managing the guards you have there properly, if you have them chained to desks, filling out paperwork, then you're not going to see them on the street. So it's up to Garda management in that way as well, I suppose, to adequately deal with that and make sure that guards are out in the street. It's not the rank and file guard who decides what they're doing on a daily basis. They're directed to places by Garda management, and so those resources have to be dealt with effectively.
They do, and of course, if you look at Talbot Street, this area, obviously, if you walk out any day, there's, for example, you can, if you were so inclined, you could nearly get stoned off walking down the street off the smell, for example, right? Now, do I personally think it's a good idea to arrest everybody smoking a joint on Talbot Street? I'm not sure that I do. If you walk out there, there's obviously bits of shoplifting and, people maybe drinking openly, for example. But are all those problems going to be solved by the addition of an extra 1,000 Gardaí on the beat, for example? I think Leo Varadkar was saying that, that was the target of recruiting an extra 1,000 Gardaí. Is there a policing solution to the problem on Talbot Street, or does it go deeper, and do we need to think differently, I suppose?
That goes far deeper. I think even as you said there, people going around smoking a joint, right? Some people mightn't agree with it, but is locking up every single person who's going around smoking a spliff the answer? It's definitely not. And I think the problem has been for years that Gardaí seem to always be landing with stuff. Any issues like that where you see somebody smoking a joint, where you have a person injecting who's gone through their own horrendous issues and addiction problems, Gardaí seem to be the answer, and lock them up or let them deal with it. But Gardaí can't do everything, and they certainly shouldn't have to do everything. And it goes to health services, mental health services, youth services, all these other kind of agencies and government-funded agencies where they are getting funding, in fairness, or a lot of them are getting funding, but that funding mightn't be used properly. So I think it goes far deeper than just saying get more Gardaí on the street and this will all stop happening. It has to be a round table discussion of loads of different services to actually get a proper solution.
100%. I mean, the guards can't make somebody not be in active addiction. I mean, that's the basic level of it. The idea of zero tolerance, wasn't it? That was in New York. There's a lot of calls for that, but that's not going to solve the core of the problem, I don't think. And even with the teenagers as well,
yeah, it's not going to, zero tolerance on somebody, smoking a joint or in personal possession of cannabis. It's not going to stop the likes of Stephen Termini coming over here and getting kicked and punched in the head, But there are a range of different issues, and I was looking at a case there, a court case before we came in today. Let's have it jotted down here. But there's a guy in his 20s. He was up in Court 5 of the Circuit Court in Dublin today.
Yeah.
And he pleaded guilty to assault, Section 3 assault, attempted robbery and violent disorder, all within 3 weeks in Dublin city centre.
Yeah.
He's 97 previous convictions, and he got a 2-year suspended sentence today.
Yeah.
And you have to say, at some stage, while you don't want to say, lock them up, but if somebody has that many convictions before the courts, they're pleading guilty to these kind of crimes and they're walking out the front door.
Yeah.
That's an issue as well,
It is. It's a huge issue. And I mean, it seems even from somebody like yourself or myself who are in and out of courts and obviously sort of generally working in this area, it seems really erratic, doesn't it? Like some of the sentencing, you know. Obviously we had a guy last week who brought his dead uncle into a post office, which nobody's saying that's okay, but he gets 2.5 years. And then you see some violent crimes in Dublin. Like, you know, it does seem erratic at times, does it not, the sentencing in this country?
Yeah, it's inconsistent. You know, there are guidelines, but they're obviously not effective enough. And like you said there, when you have a guy getting 2 years for deception,
yeah,
and then another guy attacking somebody getting 2 years, and they're different crimes, there's different backgrounds, there's always going to be different mitigation, and aggravating factors may vary, but it's just some sentence that are given out you might see are too harsh for certain crimes, and then for other I suppose more violent crimes like this one, you have somebody walking off scot-free. So the question always is, how do you fix it? I actually don't know. Do you restructure sentencing guidelines? Do you get somebody to have a word with judges? I actually don't know the answer to it, but something there has to change.
Yeah, I mean, look, there probably is, to some extent, no answer, but or no simple answer. You know, this is what always happens with this is the way it works. Something happens and it generates a load of media because of the unique circumstances of a case. Yeah. People pile in then with simple answers. You need this, you need that. And of course, it's always more complex than that. We do live in a city that is, quite safe, but it's just still those random acts of violence. I mean, even another one that you were writing about this week about a taxi driver, I think a man in his 60s, and he's being hijacked by 2 young women, which probably makes a story like that stand out. I mean, these are terrifying things that occur. Yeah,
it's the reality of it as well. Like, look, it's not the most dangerous city in Europe, but I think crime, certainly assaults and that, have gone up, even anecdotally, and I think the statistics back it up. But that incident in the Phoenix Park, of a taxi man driving around at 6:20 in the morning, just going about his normal job, and he's attacked and beaten up by these 2 women who steal his car and left in hospital. He's brought to James Connolly Hospital in Blanchardstown with injuries. And thankfully, I suppose, those 2 people have been arrested. I think they were driving around in the car all day, and I think an off-duty Garda came across them and they were arrested, which shows the kind of the strangeness of the crime, that we're not dealing with criminal masterminds here. They kind of took the car, drove around it all day, and then were finally arrested. But it's just another example of kind of serious incidents where you have a man hospitalised going about his day-to-day work,
Okay. Well, look, it'll be back. We'll be back to these issues, no doubt, and Talbot Street will continue to go for our lunch and not feel too threatened. But, you'll still every day, every week that you're in this area, you see something that is mind-blowing nearly, just in terms of that sort of sense of chaos. But we're not, it's not Gotham City just yet, I don't think either.
No, but you could definitely write a book, the stuff, the bizarre tales of Talbot Street.
You really could, you really could. It is chaotic, and it's not great, because there are people suffering in the middle of it, and people suffering from terrible problems with addiction as well, So thanks very much, Robin.
Thanks for having me on my annual appearance.
Your annual appearance could be even more regularly,
Good to hear.
Thanks.